Hey everyone, Pat from Aeroflow Performance, and welcome to our new cast aluminium carburetor intake manifold range. So as you can see, I've got a couple of big cast aluminium things here. What are they? A lot of you will probably already know. These are intake manifolds for carbureted engines. We've got the small block Ford Windsor and we've got the small block Chevy. Before you start asking, yes, Holden and Cleveland are on the way. We'll be doing those later on down the track, but we're starting with these guys. Obviously they're the most popular. There's a few variations when it comes to the style of intake manifolds that we've got. One of the biggest things that you'll probably get asked when you're looking at an intake manifold is, do you want a single plane or a dual plane manifold? What's the difference and where would you choose one or the other? So generally with a dual plane, you're going to be looking at something like this guy here, where you can see there's two separate ports, two different flow directions that will distribute the air and the fuel to the different cylinder banks on your V8 engine. A dual plane intake manifold is generally a better choice for a street engine, where it will start producing good torque and power from around 1500 RPM through to 5.5. Obviously there's variables depending on capacity and cam and all that sort of thing, but this is a general rule of thumb. So as you can see, the dual plane has got these separate sections. The inlet runners are split off to provide different airflow to the different banks. The other option is your single plane. So this guy here, there's a high rise, but as you can see there is just the one opening, and then the runner length is very similar from left to right. That will generally give you a sort of power band pushing further up, so more like a high performance engine, a race engine that's going to be living its life above 3000 RPM all the way through to potentially 8000 RPM. So that's where the variation is. If it's a street car, dual plane. If it's a race car or a high performance engine, single plane. Looks and things like that are all secondary, and that's completely up to you. If you want the big high rise on your street car and the filter sticking out the bonnet, completely up to you. But that's generally what we'll advise people. So there are 4 different types of manifold for our range. 3 of which are available in Windsor. The 4 are with the small block Chevy. So we start off with a classic intake, what we've termed a classic intake. I don't have one here, but effectively it's a standard replacement in alloy as opposed to cast. So small block Chevy, very low profile. It has a spread bore mounting plate on it. So it will take like a quadrijet or something like a factory carburetor, and it has an adapter plate to fit a square bore 4150 style Holley or Edelbrock carb. That is, as I mentioned, factory performance, something if you need to replace the intake manifold but you're not looking for great huge increase in horsepower or anything, that'll go straight back on. When we get to the next level up, you're talking the street intake manifold, which is like this guy here. So that's a dual plane intake manifold. So individual runners. It does position the carby a little bit higher, so you've got to factor that in when you're talking engine hood clearance or bonnet clearance. So that is there. That's in the Windsor and the Chevy design. After that, we go to the air gap. So as you can see here, this one's a Windsor air gap. That actually runs some spacing below the intake runners here. the benefit of that is basically to cool the intake temperatures. As the air can flow through there, it keeps these intake runners cooler. So your intake charge air with the fuel is kept much cooler as it enters the motor. This is a great performance upgrade with really good torque and power up to about 6,000 RPM. So again, you've got that in the small block Windsor and the small block Chevy. One thing to note, I guess, that might be a bit of a bonus for you guys that have a bit of an issue with hood clearance. The air gap manifold is actually slightly lower from the mounting plate compared to the street manifold. So that's something to keep in mind if you know that you're going to have clearance issues once you put a carby on there and then you filter your air cleaner element on the top. So that's actually slightly lower. One thing to keep in mind. The next one from there after the air gap, we're going to go to this guy over here, which is your high rise. So again, single plane, high rise position. So lots of velocity, lots of air volume and fuel volume that's going to be pushed down into the motor. And as I mentioned briefly before, you're talking a working range of approximately 3,000 RPM through to 8,000 RPM. So this guy is really for your big horsepower applications, larger carburetors, larger displacement, something that's going to be living at higher RPM, not just cruising around, at low RPM in traffic, for example. So that's the high rise. As you can see, we've got the black finish and the natural alloy finish. You've got that option in all different styles. They also feature standard thermostat or water neck location and style. So factory water neck or thermostat housing will go straight on there. They're an NPT thread, which is pretty standard across all of these style intake manifolds. So there's a 1/2 inch NPT and a 3/8 depending on the model. That will vary. Same again with your distributor port and position. That will just go back in the same as whatever distributor you've already got, or the ones that are available on the market, like our X Pro or any of the others that are out there. So another key feature that we think is probably fairly important when you're building a new engine, or if you're upgrading the manifold, or changing heads or whatever, is to consider the port size. So the intake port size. These may need to be matched to your cylinder heads. So we don't know what cylinder heads you've got or what your goals are. So you may find that this port diameter is a little bit different to your cylinder head. So it's always a good idea to maybe take an impression off those, compare it. Use a little bit of putty around there to check where the variation is, so you haven't got any step. Generally, if this port is smaller than your cylinder head, that's not going to really cause any major issues. But if it's the other way around, if you've got a standard cylinder head with a very small port on it, and there's a step, you want to try and blend that in. So that would be someone who's a DIYer, or potentially maybe your engine builder or cylinder head specialist that might be able to get that matched up and really reach the potential of the flow from these manifolds, as opposed to having some silly sort of thing that might cause a bit of an issue and you get a less than desired result. All right guys, so now you know about the cast carburetor intake manifold range. You can check them out at your local distributor, quality retail outlet, or jump online at aeroflowperformance.com.